Liam Whitmore had everything: wealth, power, and a future any business mogul would envy. At just 34 years old, his name was a symbol of success in every corner of the corporate world. Yet despite his riches, there was a void in his life, a void that no luxury, no deal, and no financial success could fill. One evening, a random decision to stop at a small, inconspicuous cafe led him to Nora, a waitress whose simplicity and authenticity challenged everything he believed about life. As the weight of his corporate empire pulled him in one direction, his heart tugged him in another. The world watched in shock as Liam, the man who seemingly had it all, began to question the life he had built. Nora, unaware of his identity or his internal struggle, quietly became the catalyst for the most significant change of his life. Would Liam give up everything for love, or would the allure of his powerful world consume him? This is a story where love transcends wealth, and true success is redefined. Liam Whitmore was the kind of man who had long forgotten what it meant to want for something. His family's legacy, Whitmore Enterprises, was a global conglomerate, and he had successfully grown it into one of the most powerful corporations in the country. His life was a constant whirlwind of high-stakes meetings, luxury jets, and exclusive parties. Everywhere he went, people knew his name. He wore tailored suits that cost more than most people's yearly rent and drove cars that turned heads on every street. But deep down, in the quiet moments he rarely allowed himself, Liam often wondered if all the power and privilege he had accumulated was worth the emptiness that gnawed at him. That emptiness hit him harder than usual one particular evening, after an exhausting day filled with high-pressure board meetings. He had every reason to celebrate. The company had closed another multi-million-dollar deal, and his business partners were already planning a lavish dinner to toast their success. But as Liam stood by the window of his penthouse suite, overlooking the city's gleaming skyline, he felt only fatigue. It wasn't the kind of fatigue that sleep could cure. It was the kind that settled deep in your bones when you realized something was missing in your life. On a whim, instead of heading to the celebratory dinner, Liam got into his car and drove away from the bustling heart of the city. He didn't know where he was going, only that he needed to get away from the world of luxury and opulence that had defined him for so long. His car took him down streets he hadn't visited in years, quiet, unassuming neighborhoods far removed from the glittering towers of his usual life. It was there, among the modest homes and quiet shops, that he spotted the cafe. Its appearance was unremarkable, the kind of place most people would pass by without a second thought. The paint on the outside was peeling, and the sign above the door flickered weakly, barely visible in the dim evening light. Yet something about it called to him, an inexplicable pull that made him stop the car and walk inside. The interior of the cafe was just as unassuming as its exterior. The furniture was old and mismatched, the walls decorated with faded pictures that told stories of simpler times. It smelled of freshly brewed coffee and baked bread, a stark contrast to the sterile, high-end restaurants Liam was accustomed to. It was comforting. He slid into a booth near the window, the distant hum of conversation and soft music creating an atmosphere of peace that he hadn't realized he needed. His mind wandered through the events of the day, but as his gaze drifted across the room, it landed on her. Behind the counter, moving with a quiet efficiency, was a young woman, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, her clothes simple but well-kept. She wasn't the kind of woman who turned heads at high society events. She didn't wear designer brands or have perfectly styled hair, but there was something about her, something in the way she moved, the ease with which she carried herself that captivated him. He would later learn that her name was Nora, and in that moment, without either of them knowing it, she began to unravel the carefully constructed facade of Liam Whitmore's life. Liam returned to the cafe the next evening, and the one after that. At first, it was curiosity that drove him back, the novelty of being in a place so different from the world he knew. But as the days passed, he realized it was more than that. The cafe had become a sanctuary for him, a place where the weight of his responsibilities seemed to fall away the moment he walked through the door. And it wasn't just the cafe. It was Nora. She wasn't like anyone he had ever met. In his world, people treated him with either fear or reverence, eager to gain favor or avoid his disapproval. But Nora didn't seem to care who he was. She greeted him with the same polite, unassuming smile she gave every other customer. There was no awe in her eyes, no calculation. To her, he was just another man who ordered coffee and sat in the corner booth, lost in thought. Liam watched her from his seat, intrigued by her quiet resilience. Nora worked long hours, but she never seemed hurried or stressed. She moved with a grace that belied the tiredness in her eyes, as if she had made peace with the difficulties of her life. She spoke to customers with genuine kindness, always ready with a warm word or a friendly gesture. Liam could see that the cafe was more than just a job for her. It was her haven, much like it had become his. One evening, after weeks of silently observing her from afar, Liam finally worked up the nerve to talk to her. He had stayed late, waiting until the last of the customers had left, and Nora was wiping down the tables. As she approached his booth, he cleared his throat, suddenly unsure of what to say. "Long day?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. Nora looked up, surprised by the question. She smiled, but it was a tired smile. "Every day feels long around here," she said, wiping the table with a practiced motion. "But it's a good kind of tired." Liam found himself wanting to know more about her life, but he wasn't sure how to ask without overstepping. "Do you like working here?" he asked hesitantly. Nora paused for a moment, considering his question. She glanced around the empty cafe, the faintest hint of a smile playing on her lips. "It's not about liking it," she said. "It's about needing it. This place helps me take care of my family. So yeah, I guess in a way I do like it." Liam was taken aback by her honesty. He wasn't used to people being so open with him, so unguarded. In his world, everyone had an agenda, but Nora didn't seem to have one. Over the next few weeks, their conversations became more frequent, more personal. Liam learned that Nora had been working at the cafe for years, ever since she had dropped out of college to take care of her younger brother after their parents passed away. It was a hard life, but Nora never complained. She had a quiet strength about her, a resilience that Liam admired more than he could put into words. As he spent more time with her, Liam found himself questioning the life he had built. Was it really worth it? The endless meetings, the pressure to always be on top, it had given him power, but at what cost? Nora had so little, yet she seemed to have found a kind of peace that had always eluded him. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at work, Liam found himself once again sitting in the corner booth of the cafe. He hadn't even realized how much he had come to depend on this place, on Nora. She was cleaning up for the night, and as the last customer left, she walked over to his table and sat down across from him. "You look like you could use a break," she said, her voice soft but warm. Liam smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yeah," he admitted. "It's been a long day." For a moment, neither of them said anything. The silence between them was comfortable, not awkward, and Liam found himself feeling more relaxed than he had in a long time. "You know," Nora began, her voice thoughtful, "I think sometimes we spend so much time chasing what we think we need that we forget to appreciate what we have." Her words hit Liam harder than he expected. He had spent his entire life chasing success, chasing power. But what had it gotten him, really? A big office, a penthouse suite, and a reputation that made people fear him. But none of it had brought him happiness. "I think you're right," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. Liam's connection with Nora grew stronger with each passing day, but so did the tension between the life he was living and the life he wanted. His visits to the cafe became more frequent, and every time he left, he felt a deeper desire to be part of Nora's world, a world where success wasn't measured by the size of one's bank account, but by the quiet moments of contentment. Yet, despite his growing feelings for Nora, Liam hadn't been completely honest with her. He hadn't told her about his life outside the cafe, the high-powered corporate empire he had built, the constant pressure to maintain an image of success. In the world of Whitmore Enterprises, people expected perfection. Liam wasn't sure how Nora would react when she learned the truth. Would she see him as just another rich man who treated people like tools in his quest for more power? Or would she understand that he was trying to change, to leave behind a life that had brought him nothing but emptiness? One evening, after the cafe had closed, and the two of them were sitting in their usual booth, Liam knew it was time to come clean. He couldn't keep pretending that he was just an ordinary customer who had stumbled into her life by chance. If there was any hope of a future between them, Nora needed to know the truth. "Nora," he began, his voice heavier than usual, "there's something I need to tell you." Nora looked up from the cup of tea she was holding, her eyes curious but not alarmed. "What is it?" she asked, her tone soft but attentive. Liam took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what he was about to reveal. "I haven't been completely honest with you about who I am. The truth is, I run a company, a very large company, Whitmore Enterprises. Well, I guess you could say I'm one of the wealthiest men in the city." Nora's expression didn't change immediately. She stared at him for a long moment, as if processing his words. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, but there was a note of disbelief. "You're a CEO?" she asked, her brow furrowing slightly. Liam nodded, his heart pounding. He couldn't quite read her reaction, and that terrified him more than anything. "Yeah," he said, his voice quiet. "I'm the CEO of Whitmore Enterprises. I've been running the company for almost 10 years. For a moment, the silence between them was deafening. Liam could see the wheels turning in Nora's mind as she processed what he had told her. He had expected anger, maybe even disappointment. What he hadn't expected was the sadness that flickered across her face. "I see," she said quietly, setting her cup down on the table. "So, all this time, you've been hiding that from me?" Liam winced at the hurt in her voice. He hadn't meant to deceive her, but he could see now how it must have felt like a betrayal. "I didn't mean to keep it from you," he said, his voice pleading. I didn't know how to tell you, and I was afraid that if you knew, things would change." Nora's eyes softened, but there was still a sadness there that cut Liam to the core. "Things have already changed, Liam," she said softly. "But not because of who you are. It's because you weren't honest with me." Liam felt his heart sink. He hadn't realized just how much he had hurt her by keeping the truth from her. But before he could say anything else, Nora continued. "You know," she said, her voice almost a whisper, "I didn't care who you were when you walked through that door. I still don't. What matters to me is the person sitting in front of me. But I can't help but wonder, do you know who that person is?" Her words struck him like a blow. Did he even know who he was anymore? He had spent so much of his life playing the role of Liam Whitmore, the powerful CEO, that he wasn't sure he knew the man underneath all that anymore. "I'm trying to figure that out," he admitted, his voice raw with emotion. "I've spent my whole life chasing success, and now that I have it, it feels like I have nothing. But when I'm with you, Nora, I feel like I'm finally starting to see what really matters." Nora looked at him, her eyes full of compassion, but also caution. She reached across the table and took his hand, her touch gentle but firm. "Liam, I care about you," she said quietly, "but you need to figure out who you are and what you really want from this life. I can't be the one to do that for you." Her words, though kind, left Liam feeling vulnerable and exposed. He had thought that being with Nora would solve everything, that he could leave behind the corporate world and start fresh. But now he realized that the path forward wouldn't be that simple. After that conversation, things between Liam and Nora shifted. Their bond was still strong, but there was a distance between them that hadn't been there before. Liam knew that he had to confront his own demons before he could truly move forward with her. The weight of his double life, the CEO and the man he wanted to be, was growing too heavy to bear. The breaking point came one afternoon when Eric, Liam's longtime business partner, showed up unannounced at the cafe. Liam had been avoiding the office more and more, delegating tasks to other executives and distancing himself from the day-to-day operations of Whitmore Enterprises. He knew it wouldn't go unnoticed, and now Eric was here to remind him of the responsibilities he was trying to escape. "Liam, we need to talk," Eric said, his tone more serious than usual. He glanced around the modest cafe, clearly out of place in his designer suit. "What are you doing here? This isn't like you." Liam sighed, already knowing where this conversation was headed. I've been reevaluating some things, Liam said carefully, not wanting to get into an argument in front of Nora, who was busy serving another customer. Reevaluating? Eric echoed, his eyes narrowing. What the hell does that mean? You've been neglecting the company, Liam. The board's getting nervous. Investors are asking questions. We need you to step up, not disappear into some hole-in-the-wall cafe. Liam clenched his jaw, feeling the familiar tension rise in his chest. He had known this moment would come, but it didn't make it any easier. I'm stepping back, Liam said firmly, his voice calm but resolute. I need some time to figure things out. Eric looked at him as if he had lost his mind. Step back? Liam, you're the CEO of Whitmore Enterprises. You can't just walk away. But Liam had already made his decision. The corporate world had taken so much from him, his peace, his happiness, and now it was threatening to take Nora as well. I've given everything to this company, Liam said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. And now I need to give something to myself. I'm stepping down, Eric. Eric's eyes widened in shock. You're serious, he said, disbelief coloring his voice. You're really going to throw it all away? For what? Liam glanced toward Nora, who was now standing behind the counter, her back turned to them. He had made his choice. For a life that means something, Liam said quietly. For a life where I'm not constantly chasing something that doesn't make me happy. Eric shook his head, looking at Liam as if he couldn't recognize the man standing in front of him. You're making a huge mistake, he said, his voice harsh. If you do this, you won't just lose the company. You'll lose everything. But for the first time in a long time, Liam felt certain of his decision. I've already lost too much, he said. I'm not going to lose her. That night, Liam went back to the cafe, feeling lighter than he had in years. He had stepped down from the company, leaving behind the corporate world that had defined him for so long. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. When he walked through the cafe's door, Nora was wiping down the tables, just like she did every night. She looked up when she saw him, a soft smile tugging at her lips. Hey, she said, her voice warm. Hey, Liam replied, his heart racing as he walked over to her. Nora sensed that something was different. There was a calmness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. I did it, Liam said, his voice soft but full of meaning. I stepped down from the company. I left it all behind. Nora stared at him for a moment, her eyes searching his face for any sign of hesitation. When she didn't find any, she stepped closer to him, her hand resting on his arm. You didn't have to do that for me, she said quietly, though there was a warmth in her voice that told him she was relieved. I didn't do it just for you, Liam said, his voice thick with emotion. I did it for me. I needed to find out who I really am, and I want to do that with you. Nora smiled, and in that moment, all the doubts and fears that had weighed on Liam's heart seemed to vanish. He had finally found what he had been searching for all along. Not success, not power, but love. Real, honest love. Together, they stood in the quiet cafe, their hands intertwined as they looked toward the future. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be challenges ahead, but they knew that as long as they were together, they could face anything. The next few weeks were unlike anything Liam had ever experienced. For the first time in his adult life, he wasn't rushing between meetings, living out of a suitcase, or trying to keep up with the demands of investors and board members. Instead, he found himself discovering a new rhythm, one that didn't revolve around power and profit margins. It was a slower, simpler life, but one that was far more fulfilling than he could have ever imagined. Liam spent more and more time at the cafe, not as a customer or even a businessman, but as a partner to Nora. He helped her with the day-to-day operations, learning the ins and outs of running a small business, a world that couldn't have been more different from the one he had left behind. He found joy in the smallest things, helping serve customers, stocking shelves, and watching Nora interact with people. She had a way of making everyone feel valued, and that was something Liam had never experienced in the cutthroat corporate world. One afternoon, while they were closing up the cafe, Liam and Nora sat down at one of the tables, their usual post-shift ritual. They were both exhausted, but in the best way possible, tired from a day well spent. "I never thought I'd find myself doing this," Liam said with a small smile, glancing around the cozy cafe. "A year ago, I couldn't have imagined a life like this." Nora looked at him, her eyes soft with affection. "Do you miss it?" she asked quietly. "Your old life, I mean." Liam paused for a moment, thinking about the question. There were things about his old life that he had enjoyed: the adrenaline of closing a big deal, the respect and recognition that came with his position. But those things had come at a cost, and now that he had found something real with Nora, he couldn't imagine going back. "I miss parts of it," he admitted, "but I don't miss the person I had to be to survive in that world." Nora smiled, her hand resting gently on his arm. "I'm glad you're here," she said softly. "I'm glad we're here together." Liam took her hand, squeezing it gently. He didn't need the penthouse, the fancy cars, or the extravagant parties to feel important anymore. What mattered was sitting right in front of him, the woman who had shown him what true happiness looked like. However, Liam's past wasn't so easily left behind. Though he had stepped down from his role as CEO, the media had picked up on his sudden disappearance from the business world. Rumors swirled about why the once powerful Liam Whitmore had chosen to walk away from his empire. The tabloids ran headlines speculating about everything from financial troubles to scandalous affairs, none of which were true, but all of which stung. One morning, as Liam and Nora were opening the cafe, a sleek black car pulled up outside. Liam felt his stomach drop as soon as he saw it. It wasn't just any car, it was his family's car. A man in a sharp suit stepped out, and Liam immediately recognized him as the lawyer who had worked with his family for years. "Liam," the man said as he approached, his voice professional but with a hint of urgency. "Your father wants to speak with you." Liam hadn't spoken to his father since stepping down from the company. He knew that his decision had sent shockwaves through his family, especially his father, who had built Whitmore Enterprises from the ground up and had always expected Liam to continue the legacy. "I don't have anything to say to him," Liam replied, his voice firm. The lawyer hesitated for a moment before continuing. "He's not well, Liam. He wants to see you." Liam's heart clenched. His father had always been a hard man, demanding, often cold, but hearing that he was unwell stirred something inside him. Despite their differences, Liam knew that he couldn't ignore this. That afternoon, Liam drove to his parents' estate, the place where he had grown up. It was a massive property, sprawling and grand, yet it had never felt like home. As he walked through the front doors, memories of his childhood flooded back, memories of strict discipline, high expectations, and little warmth. His father was sitting in his study, looking older and more fragile than Liam had ever seen him. The once formidable man who had commanded rooms with his presence now seemed small and frail. He looked up as Liam entered, his expression unreadable. "Sit down, Liam," his father said, his voice raspy but still authoritative. Liam sat, unsure of what to expect. The tension between them had been building for years, ever since Liam had started questioning whether the life of a corporate titan was what he truly wanted. "I heard you walked away from the company," his father said, his tone almost accusatory. "I did," Liam replied, meeting his father's gaze. "It wasn't the life I wanted anymore." For a moment, his father didn't say anything. He simply stared at Liam, as if trying to make sense of the son who had once followed so closely in his footsteps, but had now chosen a completely different path. "Why?" his father finally asked, the word laced with disappointment. Liam took a deep breath, knowing that this was a conversation they had both been avoiding for years. "Because I wasn't happy," Liam said, his voice steady. "I spent my whole life trying to live up to your expectations, trying to be the man you wanted me to be. But in doing that, I lost sight of who I was. I didn't leave the company to hurt you, Dad. I left because I needed to find out who I really am." His father's eyes narrowed, but there was a flicker of something, perhaps understanding, perhaps regret behind them. "And have you found that?" his father asked quietly. Liam nodded. "I have. I've found something better than success or power. I've found someone who loves me for who I am, not for what I can give them." There was a long pause as his father absorbed Liam's words. Finally, he sighed, his shoulders sagging under the weight of years of unspoken expectations. "I never wanted this for you, you know," his father said, his voice softer than Liam had ever heard it. I wanted you to succeed, yes, but not at the cost of your happiness. Liam was stunned by his father's admission. For so long, he had believed that his father only cared about the company, about wealth and power. But now, as he looked at the older man, he realized that maybe, just maybe, his father had wanted more for him than just success. I'm sorry, his father said, his voice breaking slightly. I pushed you too hard. I see that now. Liam felt a lump rise in his throat. He had spent so many years resenting his father, but now, sitting here, he saw a man who had made mistakes just like anyone else. I forgive you, Liam said softly, but I need to live my own life now. His father nodded, a sad but resigned look on his face. Do what makes you happy, Liam, he said quietly. That's all I ever really wanted for you. After that conversation with his father, Liam felt a sense of closure he hadn't realized he needed. He returned to the cafe where Nora was waiting for him, and for the first time in years, he felt truly free. The cafe became more than just a place to escape for Liam. It became a new beginning. With Nora's encouragement, they began expanding the business, turning the cafe into a beloved local spot that was as much a community hub as it was a place for coffee and pastries. Liam's background in business proved invaluable, but this time, he wasn't driven by profit margins or shareholder expectations. He was driven by a desire to create something meaningful, something that made a difference in people's lives. As the weeks turned into months, the cafe grew, and so did Liam and Nora's relationship. They faced challenges, of course. Managing a business was never easy, and there were moments of doubt and frustration. But through it all, they had each other, and that made all the difference. One evening, as they were closing up the cafe, Nora looked at Liam, a playful smile on her lips. Do you ever regret it? She asked, teasing but with genuine curiosity behind the question. Leaving all that behind? Liam laughed softly, pulling her close. Not for a second, he said, his voice full of conviction. I've never been happier than I am right now. Nora smiled, resting her head on his shoulder as they looked out at the quiet street, the glow of the cafe's lights casting a warm light around them. In that moment, Liam knew that he had made the right choice. He had walked away from a life of power and prestige, but he had found something far more valuable. He had found love, peace, and a future that was his own. Together, they would build something beautiful. Thank you so much for watching until the end. We hope this story touched your heart as much as it did ours. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to leave a comment below and share what you think about Liam and Nora's journey. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And of course, make sure to subscribe to Driven by Stories for more inspiring and emotional stories that will keep you captivated. See you in the next one.